The war had lasted longer than anyone could remember. For decades, humans and Zephyrians had fought each other without pause. Cities had burned, fields had turned to ash, and countless lives were lost on both sides. Every day, soldiers learned to hate, to expect betrayal, and to trust no one, not even their own allies in some cases. Yet, Captain Eric Hayes, a human soldier known for his bravery and sharp instincts, had a strange way of seeing the world. He didn't just see enemies. He saw people, even in the midst of war. That day, the battlefield was eerily quiet. Smoke rose in thick gray clouds, and the scent of burning metal and scorched earth hung in the air. Eric crouched behind a broken wall, scanning the ruined streets of the enemy city. His orders were simple: scout, report, and avoid unnecessary engagement. The Zephyrians were ruthless, and every mission had the risk of being the last. Yet, amidst the silence, Eric heard something unusual, a soft, frightened sound that did not belong to the war around him. It was a small, desperate cry, muffled but unmistakable. He froze. Every instinct screamed to stay hidden. A trap could be waiting. It could be an ambush. Soldiers had been killed for less. But the cry pulled at him, a threat of humanity that he could not ignore. He followed the sound carefully, moving through narrow alleys and over rubble. The smoke made it hard to see, and every shadow seemed alive. Then, behind a crumbling wall, he saw her. A small Zephyrian girl, no more than 10 years old, crouched against the ruins, trembling. Her blue eyes were wide with fear, and her thin arms clutched a torn blanket to her chest. Blood smeared her cheek, and dirt covered her tiny hands. She looked so fragile, so human in her terror, that Eric's chest tightened. Eric's mind raced. Humans were trained to leave the enemy to die. Soldiers were not supposed to hesitate, not supposed to show mercy. But looking at her, the lines between enemy and victim blurred. She was a child, innocent, alone, and terrified. Something deep inside him refused to turn away. Hello? The girl stammered, her voice barely audible. She took a small step forward, then retreated, unsure if she could trust him. Her fear was understandable. Humans were the enemy, after all, but there was a spark of hope in her eyes. Eric knelt down to appear smaller, less threatening. "It's okay," he said softly. "I won't hurt you. I'm here to help." For a moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she crawled toward him, her small hand reaching out. When she touched his armored chest, her fingers trembled, and a shiver ran through her tiny frame. Eric felt a surge of protectiveness he hadn't expected. He realized in that instant that this girl, this fragile being, depended entirely on him. And he would not fail her. The city around them still burned. Explosions shook the ground, and distant shouts reminded Eric that danger was never far. Yet for a few precious seconds, time seemed to stop. It was just him and the girl, two lives connected by chance, caught in a world that had forgotten mercy. Eric lifted her carefully, making sure not to jostle her. She clung to him tightly, as if letting go meant she would disappear. He adjusted his armor and checked his surroundings. The path ahead was dangerous, but there was only one choice: get her out alive. Every step was a calculated risk. He avoided open streets, crawled through rubble, and stayed in shadows. All around, the remnants of war whispered of death, but Eric moved with purpose. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was her protector. Every instinct honed by years of combat now served a new mission to save her. No matter what the cost, the girl whispered her name, Lyra. It was a small, fragile sound, but Eric repeated it silently in his mind. Lyra, he would remember it. He would fight to bring her home. And somewhere deep down, he knew that this simple act, this choice to save a child, would change everything, not just for Lyra, but for himself, because in a world torn apart by hate, Eric realized something important. Humanity was not measured by the battles one fought or the enemies one defeated. Humanity was measured by the courage to act with compassion, even when it was hardest, even when it was forbidden. And in that moment, hiding behind the ruins of a shattered city, Eric Hayes chose humanity. He would save her. No matter the cost, Eric moved cautiously through the ruined streets, Lyra clinging to him with small, trembling hands. The air was thick with smoke, the scent of burning metal and dust filling his lungs. Every sound made him tense, the distant roar of explosions, the crunch of debris beneath his boots, even the faint scurrying of rats. The city was alive with danger, but he could not falter. Lyra's life depended on him, and failure was not an option. Are they coming?" Lyra whispered, her voice quivering. "They might be," Eric replied calmly, though his heart pounded. "But I won't let anyone hurt you. I promise." He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, heavier than any armor he had ever worn. This was no longer a mission for strategy or orders. It was personal. This girl, a child of his supposed enemies, was now his priority. As they turned a corner, a patrol of Zephyrian soldiers appeared, weapons raised. Their eyes widened in shock, seeing a human with one of their own children. Eric froze for a split second too late. They had seen him. The first shot rang out, and a blast hit the wall near him, sending debris flying. Instinct took over. Eric pressed Lyra against his chest and rolled behind cover. Bullets and energy blasts cracked the air around them. The patrol shouted in their alien language, a sound harsh and unfamiliar, but the intent was clear. They would not let them pass. Eric's mind raced. He had trained for combat situations, for ambushes and firefights. But this was different. This was not about killing the enemy, it was about protecting an innocent life. He drew a deep breath and stepped out from behind the rubble. In a blur of motion, he dodged a blast, spun to the side, and tackled one soldier to the ground. He moved with a speed and agility that seemed almost unnatural, weaving between attacks, using the environment to his advantage. Every move was precise, every decision critical. Lyra's small hands clutched his armor, her trust unwavering. And that trust gave him strength. The battle was intense but brief. Eric's human instincts, honed through years of war, gave him an edge the Zephyrians did not expect. He disarmed, dodged, and struck with controlled force, moving like a storm through the chaos. Finally, the last soldier fell, unconscious but alive. Eric didn't celebrate. He only checked Lyra. She was shaken, but unharmed. Are you okay?" he asked gently. Lyra nodded, tears streaming down her dirty cheeks. You saved me," she whispered, her voice small but full of wonder. Eric knelt and looked into her eyes. "I will always protect you, Lyra. That's my promise." They could not stay. The city was far from safe, and more soldiers would come. Eric helped Lyra to her feet, and they continued their journey through twisted streets and collapsed buildings. Every step was a risk, but every step was necessary. Eric had become more than a soldier. He was now a guardian, carrying not just a child, but the hope of something better. As they moved, Lyra spoke softly about her home, about her mother, and about the small joys she had known before the war. Eric listened, nodding, letting her words fill the silence of the destroyed city. It was strange to think that on the other side of hatred and fear, there were ordinary lives, families, and love. Just like his own. At night, they took shelter in an abandoned building. Lyra curled against his side, finally letting herself rest. Eric sat near the entrance, alert for any threats, but his mind was not on danger, it was on the child who had trusted him so completely. He realized something important. In a world full of hatred, compassion was a kind of power too. "Thank you for saving me," Lyra whispered before sleep claimed her. Eric smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Humans fight many battles, Lyra, but this one is about heart, and heart is stronger than any weapon." Outside, the wind carried the distant sounds of war, a reminder that their journey was far from over. But inside that small ruined building, a human and a child had found a moment of peace. A bond forged in courage and trust. Eric knew the path ahead would be dangerous, perhaps impossible, but he also knew one undeniable truth: he would not leave her side. Nothing, not fear, not death, not the world itself, would break his promise. For Lyra, he would be unstoppable. For Lyra, he would be human at his best. The city behind them smoldered in silence as Eric and Lyra moved cautiously through the outskirts. Each step forward felt heavier than the last. The ruins of buildings cast long, jagged shadows, and the occasional distant roar of explosions reminded them that the war was far from over. Eric's eyes constantly scanned for movement, listening for any sign of danger. Zephyrian patrols could appear at any moment, and there was no backup. No reinforcements, just him and the child he had promised to protect. Lyra walked close, sometimes holding his hand, sometimes clutching his armor. She was quiet, her small face set with concentration, but Eric could feel the tension radiating from her. The journey was long, and each obstacle tested their patience and endurance. He moved through debris-strewn streets, over collapsed walls, and across shallow streams of blackened water. Every so often, he paused to reassure her, to make sure she was still with him and unharmed. Do you think my mother knows I'm coming?" Lyra asked softly, glancing up at him with anxious eyes. "She will know," Eric said, smiling gently despite the exhaustion in his body. "She will see you soon, and she will be so happy." We just have to keep moving. Lyra nodded, but her hands trembled as she clutched his armor. She had been alone for days, and the thought of returning to her mother both excited and scared her. Eric understood. He had fought countless battles, but this was different. He wasn't only fighting to survive. He was fighting for someone else's life. And the weight of that responsibility burned in his chest. As they moved, Eric taught Lyra small lessons in survival. He showed her how to step lightly to avoid broken glass, how to duck behind cover when danger appeared, and how to keep her breath calm when fear threatened to take over. She listened intently, her trust in him growing with every word. For the first time in days, she smiled, a small, fragile thing, but full of hope. That smile gave Eric strength he hadn't realized he possessed. By midday, they reached a small patch of forest outside the city. The trees were blackened from previous fires, but the shadows offered cover. Eric stopped, letting Lyra catch her breath. "We can rest here for a short while," he said. "But we can't stay too long. Others may be looking for us." Lyra sat on a fallen tree, brushing dirt from her hands. I never thought someone from the enemy side could care about me like this," she whispered, almost to herself. Eric knelt beside her. "Humans are complicated," he said with a small smile. "We fight, we hurt, we kill. But sometimes we can do something better. We can protect, we can save, and we can care. That is what I'm doing for you." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered. It was a simple word, but it carried the weight of everything she had endured, the fear, the loss, the loneliness. Eric felt a lump in his throat. There was no medal, no praise, no recognition for this. Only the quiet bond between a soldier and a child who depended on him. The sun began to set, casting long orange and purple streaks across the sky. Eric knew the night would be dangerous. Zephyrian patrols often moved under the cover of darkness. He carried Lyra on his back for a portion of the journey, moving swiftly and silently. Every shadow could hide an enemy, every sound could be a warning. Yet Eric never faltered. Every instinct, every training drill, every hard-earned skill was focused on one goal, keeping her safe. As darkness fully descended, they found an abandoned shelter hidden beneath thick roots and branches. Lyra curled against him, exhausted and shivering. Eric stood watch near the entrance, alert for any signs of danger. He could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders, yet he also felt something unfamiliar: pride, not in victory, but in courage. This was humanity at its best: mercy, bravery, and relentless protection of the innocent. Lyra's breathing grew steady, and her small hand rested on his chest. Eric looked down at her, feeling the fierce resolve that had brought him this far. "We're getting closer, Lyra," he whispered. "We'll see your mother soon. I promise." Outside, the wind rustled through the blackened trees, carrying the distant echoes of war. But inside that small hidden shelter, for one night, there was safety, there was trust, and there was hope. Eric knew that no matter what came next, he would face it with the same courage that had guided him this far. For Lyra, for the promise of life beyond war, he would never give up. The night was dark and heavy, the moon hidden behind thick clouds, when Eric and Lyra moved cautiously through the outskirts of the forest. Every step felt dangerous, every sound amplified in the silence. Eric's senses were sharp, his instincts alert. The war had taught him to expect the worst, and tonight, the worst was coming. Suddenly, a rustle in the shadows caught his attention. Eric froze, signaling Lyra to stay quiet. Two Zephyrian soldiers emerged from behind a fallen tree, their weapons glowing faintly in the darkness. Eric's heart sank. They had been spotted. There was no way around this. They had to face them. Lyra clutched his armor, eyes wide with fear. "Eric, what do we do?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "We stay calm," Eric replied, kneeling slightly so he appeared less threatening to her. "I've got this. Just trust me." The soldiers shouted in their harsh language, stepping forward, their weapons aimed directly at them. Eric's mind worked quickly. He could fight, yes, but he needed to keep Lyra safe above all else. He moved in a blur, dodging a sudden blast and pushing Lyra behind a broken wall. Her small body pressed close to his, her trust complete, and it gave him strength beyond reason. Eric struck first, using his speed and agility. Humans were known for their unpredictable movements in battle, and tonight, that was their advantage. He rolled, dodged, and disarmed the first soldier with a combination of skill and instinct that seemed almost superhuman. The Zephyrians had trained their whole lives, but they were not prepared for the raw determination of a human protecting a child. The second soldier fired repeatedly, forcing Eric to keep moving. Bullets and energy blasts scorched the ground around them. Eric stayed focused, weaving between obstacles, using the ruined forest to shield Lyra from harm. At one point, he dived over a fallen log, Lyra clinging tightly to his back, and landed in a crouch, ready to strike. Every move had to be precise. Any mistake could cost both their lives. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last soldier fell, dazed and unable to continue the fight. Eric breathed heavily, adrenaline still pumping through his veins. He checked Lyra. She was shaken, but unharmed. Tears streaked her dirty face, but there was relief in her eyes, a mixture of fear, gratitude, and awe. You saved me again," she whispered, her voice small but filled with wonder. Eric knelt and looked into her eyes. "I promised you, Lyra, and I meant it. No one will hurt you while I'm here." The sounds of battle faded into the distance, but the danger was far from over. Eric knew more soldiers could be approaching at any moment. He helped Lyra to her feet, guiding her through a narrow path between charred trees. Every step required vigilance. Every shadow could hide an enemy. And yet, the bond between them grew stronger with each challenge. They walked for hours, Lyra occasionally asking questions about her home, her mother, and the life she had almost lost. Eric answered patiently, letting her hope grow. "We're getting closer, Lyra," he said softly. "I can feel it. Soon you'll see her, and it will all be worth it." As dawn began to break, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds, illuminating the forest in a pale, golden light. Eric allowed himself a brief moment of relief. They had survived the confrontation. They had survived the night. And for Lyra, that survival was more than just a physical victory. It was proof that someone from the enemy side could care, could protect, and could act with courage and honor. Lyra's small hand found his, and she squeezed it gently. "I trust you," she said simply. The words, though few, carried a weight that touched Eric deeply. In that moment, he understood the full meaning of what he was doing. This was not just a rescue mission. This was a bridge between worlds, a symbol of hope that even amidst war, humanity could shine. Eric nodded, his jaw set with determination. "And I will keep that promise," he said. "No matter what comes next, we'll make it, together." The forest seemed quieter now, the echoes of the night's danger fading into the early morning. But Eric knew the journey was far from over. Ahead lay more obstacles, more risks, and the unknown path to Lyra's mother. Yet he was ready. For Lyra, for hope, for the chance to show that humanity could rise above fear and hatred. He would face whatever came. Because this was not just a mission. This was a promise. And Eric Hayes never broke a promise. The morning sun was just beginning to rise as Eric and Lyra emerged from the forest. The smoke from the ruined city still lingered in the distance, but here, the air was clearer, and the world felt almost calm. Lyra's small hand gripped his tightly, her steps hesitant but determined. After days of running, hiding, and fighting to survive, the thought of seeing her mother gave her hope and courage. Do you think she'll recognize me?" Lyra asked softly, her voice trembling with both fear and excitement. "She will," Eric said with a gentle smile. "She's your mother. She'll know you right away. And she'll be so happy you're safe." Lyra nodded, though doubt still lingered in her wide eyes. She had been separated from her mother for so long. The fear of being lost forever had haunted her every moment. But now, with Eric beside her, guiding her, she felt a small spark of hope as they walked toward her village. The first signs of life appeared, people moving through the streets, gathering food, tending to small gardens. Some looked at them with suspicion. A human walking with a Zephyrian child was not an everyday sight. Eric kept his posture calm, his eyes scanning for threats. But his focus was always on Lyra. He would not let anyone harm her, not now, not ever. Finally, they reached the small house where Lyra had lived before the war had torn everything apart. The door burst open, and a woman appeared, her face pale and lined with worry. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she saw her daughter. "Lyra!" she cried, rushing forward, arms outstretched. Lyra ran into her mother's embrace, tears streaming down both their faces. For a moment, the world seemed to disappear. There was no war, no danger, only the pure joy of reunion. Eric stepped back slightly, watching the scene unfold. He felt a strange mix of relief and emotion. This was why he had risked everything. This was why he had pushed through fear, through danger, through exhaustion. To see this, the mother holding her child again, made every hardship worthwhile. The mother finally noticed Eric standing nearby. his armor scratched and scorched, his expression calm but vigilant. She froze, studying him carefully. There was a flash of suspicion in her eyes, and Eric instinctively stepped forward, raising his hands slightly. "I brought her back," he said simply, his voice steady. "She's safe. I promised I would protect her, and I did." The woman's gaze softened slightly, but still, she said nothing. She looked at Lyra, who smiled up at her, then back at Eric. He saved me," Lyra whispered, almost shyly. The mother's eyes filled with tears again. She looked at Eric with a mix of awe, gratitude, and something deeper: respect, trust, and an unspoken understanding. "You risked your life. For my child?" she asked softly, her voice shaking. Eric nodded. "Yes, I didn't think twice. She's just a child. She didn't deserve any of this. No one does." For a long moment, the woman said nothing. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched his arm, almost as if testing the reality of his presence. "For that, you will always have a place here," she said. "With us, forever." Eric felt warmth spread through him, a feeling stronger than relief, stronger than any medal or praise he had ever received. This was recognition not for his skill in battle, but for his courage, his compassion, and his humanity. He had crossed boundaries, saved a life, and shown that even in war, humans could act with honor and mercy. Lyra clung to her mother, looking back at Eric with gratitude and trust. "I knew you'd keep me safe," she said softly. "I will always keep you safe, Lyra," Eric replied. "No matter what comes next." The mother studied him again, her eyes reflecting a deep respect. "We will remember this. Always. Not just what you did, but what you are. You are human at your best." Eric nodded, feeling the weight of her words. It was more than thanks. It was acknowledgement that courage and compassion could cross even the deepest divides. He had saved a life, yes, but in doing so, he had also shown that humanity was capable of greatness, capable of hope, capable of love. Outside, the village began to stir with life. Children played, elders tended gardens, and for the first time in days, Lyra felt truly safe. And Eric, standing quietly beside her mother, realized that this was only the beginning, not just of their journey home, but of a bond that could change hearts and minds in ways that war never could. For Lyra, for her mother, and for what humanity could be, he had made a difference. And that difference was forever. After the reunion, life slowly began to change for Eric, Lyra, and her mother. The village, once wary of humans, now looked at him differently. At first, many were suspicious, whispering behind closed doors. A human walking freely among Zephyrians was unheard of. But when they saw him train the children, help rebuild homes, and protect the villagers from dangers both wild and lingering from the war, their suspicion began to fade. Eric did not speak much about the battles he had fought or the soldiers he had faced. That part of his life was behind him. Instead, he focused on what mattered now: helping, protecting, and teaching. Each day, he showed that humans could be more than warriors. They could be teachers, guardians, and friends. The villagers watched as Lyra thrived under his care, her laughter returning, her small steps becoming confident strides. And as she grew stronger, so did their trust in him. Lyra's mother Mara became a quiet ally. She observed Eric closely, noting the care he took with every task, the patience he showed with Lyra, and the courage he displayed when danger threatened. One afternoon, she approached him while he helped rebuild a roof that had collapsed in the last storm. "You do not have to stay," she said gently, her eyes studying him. "You could leave and return to your people. No one would blame you." Eric paused, looking at the village, at the children playing safely nearby, and at Lyra, who waved at him with a big smile. "I can't leave," he replied softly. "Not now. Not after what I promised." Her expression softened. "You saved her," she said, voice almost breaking. "Not just her life, but her heart. You have done what no one else could. And for that, I want you here. Not as a stranger, not as an enemy. As part of us." Eric felt a lump in his throat. He had fought countless battles, faced death more times than he could count, yet nothing had felt as significant as these words. He realized that bravery was not only measured in combat, it was measured in compassion, in standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult, even when it was dangerous. That days turned into weeks. Eric worked alongside Zephyrians, helping to rebuild homes, teaching basic survival skills, and sharing his knowledge of strategy and protection. The villagers slowly came to trust him, asking for guidance, seeking his advice, and even laughing at his awkward attempts to understand their culture. Each small act, each shared smile, slowly melted the walls of fear and hatred that had divided them for so long. Lyra often ran to him, her small hands grabbing his as she insisted he see something new she had discovered, a bird's nest, a wildflower, or a clever hiding place in the woods. Eric smiled every time, feeling the joy of life returning to a world that had been dark and broken. Her laughter became a song in his heart, a reminder of why he had come and why he stayed. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Mara approached Eric once more. She placed a hand on his shoulder and looked into his eyes. "You are not just a human," she said softly. "You are a bridge between our worlds, our people, and our hearts. Because of you, we see that trust is possible, that kindness is stronger than fear, and that even enemies can become allies." Eric nodded, a quiet smile on his lips. "I did not do this for recognition," he said. "I did it because it was the right thing to do. Because a child's life is worth more than any war." Mara's eyes glistened with tears, and she squeezed his shoulder gently. "And because of you, our lives are better. Our children will grow up seeing that humans are capable of great things. You have given us hope." In that moment, Eric understood the full power of humanity, not the war, not the battles, not the victories over enemies, but the courage to act with mercy, compassion, and integrity. One human had changed the course of many lives, showing that honor was not limited to soldiers or nations, but lived in the choices one made every day. Lyra ran past them, laughing, her small voice carrying through the village. Eric watched her and felt a surge of pride. She was safe, she was happy, and she would grow up knowing the difference one human could make. And that, he realized, was a victory far greater than any battle he had ever fought. For the first time in years, Eric felt the world was not only worth fighting in, it was worth protecting. And he would stay, for Lyra, for Mara, and for the promise of a better future, forever.